The movie begins with Frank Morris, a career criminal and skilled escape artist, being transported to Alcatraz, a maximum security prison located on a desolate island in San Francisco Bay. Known for housing the most dangerous and incorrigible inmates, Alcatraz has earned a notorious reputation for being inescapable. Upon arrival, Frank undergoes the prison's harsh intake process, including a strip search. He is then led to his cell, where he is expected to spend the rest of his days. The next morning, Frank eats in the dining hall where he meets Litmus, a friendly old-timer with a pet rat. Litmus shares his meal with the rodent, and the two strike up a conversation. However, Frank also notices another inmate sitting nearby, Wolf, who openly tries to intimidate him. Later, Frank is summoned to the warden's office for a stern debriefing. The warden explains that Alcatraz is where society sends its most unmanageable prisoners and stresses that no one has ever successfully escaped. He warns Frank against even attempting it, but while the warden lectures, Frank discreetly swipes a nail clipper from the desk, a small but defiant act. As he returns to his cell, he hides the clipper inside his Bible. Later, during a group shower, Wolf approaches Frank and makes lewd, suggestive remarks. Without hesitation, Frank retaliates, striking Wolf in the groin and stuffing a bar of soap into his mouth, leaving him humiliated. He then calmly finishes his shower, solidifying his reputation as someone not to be messed with. The prison library becomes a place of respite for Frank, where he meets English, a fellow inmate passionate about books and history. The two form a bond. During recreation time in the yard, Frank also meets Doc, a gifted artist working on a self-portrait. Doc explains that while the prison controls his body, his spirit remains free. He recalls growing chrysanthemums in the past as a symbol of hope, but in a place like Alcatraz, hope can be a dangerous thing. For Doc, his art is what keeps him going, for now. That evening, a guard informs Frank about a carpenter job that pays $1 an hour. He accepts, and the guard offers him a rare kind word. However, trouble soon follows. During another recreation period, Wolf returns, this time armed with a shank, attempting to ambush Frank. Fortunately, Doc alerts him just in time. Frank quickly uses his jacket to block the weapon, and a fight breaks out, ending. When Wolf attacks a guard who intervenes to stop the fight, both he and Frank are punished. Wolf is sent to D Block, the prison's solitary confinement section, and despite acting in self-defense, Frank is sent there as well. After 2 grueling weeks in isolation, Frank returns to his cell. Litmus sends him a welcome back note via his pet rats, lifting his spirits. Frank also befriends his new neighbor, Charlie Butts, who is serving time for Grand Theft Auto. Charlie confides in Frank about his regret. Crossing state lines turned his crime into a federal offense. Meanwhile, the warden takes an unannounced tour of the cell block. When he enters a prisoner's cell, he notices a detailed portrait of himself in Doc's cell and initially seems flattered. However, he later retaliates by ordering the guards to confiscate all of Doc's art supplies. Despite Frank's attempts to console him, Doc withdraws into despair. During a shift in the carpentry shop, Doc shocks everyone by chopping off 3 of his fingers with a hatchet, a desperate protest against losing his artistic freedom. Guards scramble to get medical help as Frank watches in silent disbelief. That night, back in his cell, Frank notices a cockroach crawl into the ventilation grill under his sink. Curious, he investigates and realizes the grill might lead somewhere. Meanwhile, English visits Frank and reveals that the warden took away Doc's painting privileges because of the unflattering portrait. At the next meal, Frank sits with John and Clarence Anglin, 2 brothers he recognizes from a previous prison stint. They discuss the grim reality of Alcatraz and the impossibility of escape due to the frigid waters surrounding the island. However, this conversation plants the seed of an idea in Frank's mind. That night, using the stolen nail clipper, Frank begins chipping away at the concrete around his ventilation grill. He works methodically, hiding the tool inside his Bible and pretending to read whenever guards pass by. The following day, during outdoor time, both Charlie and English receive visitors. English struggles to find words for his daughter, who has grown up in his absence. Meanwhile, Charlie's wife brings devastating news. His mother is gravely ill and has only months to live. The next morning, Frank gathers John and Clarence, and together they begin to strategize. Frank theorizes that the salty air and moisture have corroded the prison's infrastructure, making it possible to chip away at the ventilation grills and access the utility shafts. thoughts. His optimism unites them, and the men commit to working together, setting the stage for their daring escape attempt. That night, Frank continues chipping away at the vent in his cell using a makeshift tool, while Charlie keeps watch, ready to whistle if a guard approaches. Despite making progress, Frank grows frustrated. The nail clipper is too slow, and his fingers ache from the effort. The next morning at breakfast, Frank discreetly brainstorms alternatives. He dirties a spoon on the sole of his shoe and calls a guard over, claiming the utensil is too filthy to use. The others catch on and mimic his request. Seeing nothing suspicious, the guard replaces their spoons, unknowingly aiding their escape. At the front table, when John distracts a guard with small talk, Frank seizes the opportunity to pocket an extra spoon. Later, he trades servings of dessert with Litmus to acquire additional materials. He snaps the spoon in half and combines it with parts from the nail clipper and a coin, grinding the coin into powder. Using heat from a match, he fuses the components together, creating a far more effective digging tool. That night, Frank resumes chiseling the wall, with Charlie keeping watch. The new tool cuts through the concrete much faster. However, as Frank works, a guard approaches for inspection. Charlie, dozing off, fails to warn him in time. English quickly steps in, distracting the guard with conversation, while Charlie bangs on the bars to alert Frank. Frank swiftly hides the vent with his accordion box and casually chats with the guard. Once the coast is clear, he resumes his work. Frank soon realizes that the vent is bolted in place and will require another tool to remove. The next day, during outdoor time, he secretly disposes of the concrete debris. Once back inside, he quickly carves a wooden chip, planning to use it to remove the bolts. But how could he bypass the metal detector during inspection? For a man with an IQ of 200, this was no challenge. When the guard checked him, Frank deliberately pulled out the wooden chip, claiming it was for hanging his clothes. The guard confiscated it, but Frank had secretly hidden another one in the sole of his shoe. Back in his cell, he uses the wedge to pry off the bolts, finally removing the grate. Behind it, a network of pipes stretches before him, a possible path to freedom. But more planning is necessary. Frank proposes making papier-mâché dummy heads to fool the guards during nightly inspections. The group collects materials. John gathers hair from the barbershop, Charlie requests paint, and Frank secures newspapers through English. Mixing wall fragments with water, they create a cement-like substance to hold the heads together. Charlie meticulously paints the faces, making them lifelike enough to pass as sleeping inmates. To further their disguise, Charlie constructs a replica of the iron gate to conceal the removed vent. One night, Frank decides to scout ahead. Crawling through the vent, he climbs the pipes to an upper level, only to find a steel door blocking the way. Meanwhile, a guard inspects his cell. It's a close call, and the group realizes their plan needs refinement. At lunch the next day, Charlie and Frank share their near miss with the others. Despite the setback, John and Clarence complete their dummy heads, and the group presses on. That night, Charlie and John return to the pipes to investigate further. Working together, they reach the steel door and discover it is secured with heavy metal covers. Removing them would require tools far beyond what they currently have. During a music class, Charlie spots an old fan and sees its potential as a makeshift drill. He negotiates with Litmus, trading all his future desserts for the necessary parts. To smuggle the fan past the guards, Charlie hides it inside an instrument case. When questioned, he plays it off smoothly, catching the guard off guard, allowing him to pass unnoticed. Back in the cell block, Frank devises a makeshift drill from the small fan to remove the structural supports. The noise attracts the attention of the guards, but they dismiss it as unimportant. That night, with the passageway clear and the rafts nearly ready, Frank schedules the escape for Tuesday night. A few days later, on the day of the planned escape, during mealtime, Frank places a chrysanthemum on the table in honor of Doc. The warden, noticing the gesture, cruelly crushes it under his hand. Litmus, enraged, moves to attack the warden, but suddenly clutches his chest, suffering a fatal heart attack. Later, the warden orders a shakedown of Frank's cell. The guards search thoroughly but find nothing unusual. It was a close call. However, when the warden hears that Frank and Charlie have been staying up late, conversing, he orders their immediate relocation to different cells, unknowingly threatening the entire escape plan. Meanwhile, Wolf is released from solitary confinement and, driven by vengeance, prepares to stab Frank, but English intercepts him just in time, preventing the attack. The escape begins. That night, Frank, John, Clarence, and Charlie prepare to meet in the passageway and make their escape. But at the last moment, Charlie panics. Fear grips him, and he decides not to go, remaining frozen in his cell while the others press on. Alone in the darkness, he quietly weeps. Carrying the flotation gear, Frank and the brothers climb to the roof, carefully avoiding the searchlights. Meanwhile, back in his cell, Charlie hesitates. Then, after what feels like an eternity, he musters the courage to join the escape. He reaches the steel gate that stands between him and freedom, but without help, he can't climb to the top. The weight of his hesitation and fear crushes him. His chance at escape has slipped away. Meanwhile, Frank, John, and Clarence successfully cross the barbed wire and move toward the edge of the prison perimeter. They slip into a grove of trees, then cross a deserted road, finally reaching the coastline. Working quickly and quietly, they unpack the inflatable raft and begin blowing it up. At last, the raft is ready. They don their life vests, climb aboard, and push off into the icy waters of the bay, disappearing into the night. The aftermath. Back at the prison, the guards begin their routine morning inspections. When the warden reaches Frank's cell, he sees what appears to be Frank still sleeping in bed. But as he draws closer, the unsettling truth is revealed. Panic erupts. Whistles blow. Guards scramble in every direction as a massive search begins. From a distance, English watches the chaos unfold. A faint, knowing smile crosses his face. Someone had finally done what no one thought possible. They had escaped Alcatraz. The warden immediately launches a full-scale search of the island and surrounding waters. Boats and helicopters scour the bay, but no trace of the escapees is found. All that remains are a few raincoat-wrapped photographs and a single flower, a haunting reminder of the freedom the men sought. Most of the prison staff assume the trio drowned. The bay's freezing waters and unforgiving currents make survival seem impossible. But deep down, the warden isn't so sure. Yet, to protect his reputation and Alcatraz's fearsome legacy, he publicly declares the escape a failure, insisting the men perished in the attempt. This carefully crafted narrative ensures Alcatraz remains known as the inescapable fortress. But did they really drown, or did they achieve the impossible? The truth remains a mystery. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more thrilling content.